a machine that could tabulate information, that was querying the database. By modern standards, obviously, it was ridiculously primitive, but it had a major effect in terms of the processing of the census data. The next thing that I want to talk about are you in data structures or database? Discrete structures, even worse. Professor Reagan, 238. 238, the next door over. I didn't think they'd let him teach data structures. Okay. All right. In the old days for information processing, people had a file called a sequential file. Now, what does the word sequential imply in this case? That it was in a row that you had to process the first item, and the second, and the third, and the fourth. That worked fine if you had 10 to 15 items, but as the number of items went to hundreds or thousands, which course are you looking for?
7.5.
You're in the right. Okay. Can you guess that, please? The sequential file was a relatively primitive way of storing the information. It worked okay for certain relatively simple situations, but eventually did not work. Around 1970, the United States government had something called the Apollo Project. Anybody know what that did? That was an attempt. Which course are you looking for? 238.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Sorry for helping.
You notice all the polite ones go to his class. Do I want to put solar? You were. Okay. All right, the Apollo Project. Anybody look it up on the internet and say yes? It was an attempt to put a man on the moon. Believe it or not, people actually walked on the moon at one point. Why they considered that important, we won't go into. I don't believe anybody has done it for 35 years, but at one point, this was considered a big deal. They invested a tremendous amount of money and effort in this project, and in particular, they had to keep track of lots of, you think they're going to read the signs. Yeah, right. There was a tremendous amount of money invested in keeping track of things, and in particular, they came up with something called a hierarchical system. That was a way of storing information that looks something like this. Now, in computer science terms, what do we call something that looks like this? A tree. This was a tree structure covered in data structures. It turned out to be very helpful. There were lots of situations that fit into this particular model. And there was a database, for example, called IMS, Integrated Management Systems, that fit this model. But it doesn't satisfy every possible setup. In particular, let's say I give names to some of these nodes. If you want to go for, in a tree, what's the easy way to go? You can go from a node down to its, what do we call the nodes, one down? The child, either the son or the daughter node. You can go from a node to its parent sometime, but it's not easy to go from A to B. I guess that would be an aunt or an uncle node in a sense. Or if you would want to go from A, let's say to this node C, that could not easily be done in a tree structure. There is a more general data structure called a graph or a network, and in that, any node can be connected to any other node. Which course are you looking for?
Discrete structure.
230.
I guess, hey, that's right.